Welcome to season 2 of Heart of the System. After 50 episodes, we've changed up the format from one-on-one conversations to panel discussions, where we discuss how sport, leisure, and physical activity can contribute to the wider system. And today, I've got 3 leaders working across New South Wales and Queensland, advocating and providing leadership on homelessness issues, promoting sustainable housing system. So I'd like to introduce Trina Jones, CEO of Homelessness New South Wales, Jackson Hills, Manager Policy and Strategic Engagement at Q Shelter Queensland, and John Ingler, CEO Shelter New South Wales. How are you guys?
Good, thanks.
Good, thanks, David.
Hi, David.
Great to have you today. And Trina, you can't see us at the moment, but you're still jumping in, so thanks for that. First of all, what I'd like to do is just go around the room, and if you could just give us a 1-minute introduction of yourself and your role. I'll now go over to Jackson.
Thanks, David. So, look, my role is, as you mentioned there, policy and strategic engagement. So it's everything to do with advocacy for our sector. So Q Shelter largely represents social and affordable housing here in Queensland, and also the homelessness service providers up here as well. It's about 100 community housing providers and close to 200 different service providers in the homelessness space. My background's actually in public policy and sport prior to that, which is going to be relevant to today's discussion, and been involved in the sector now for the last 12 months.
Yeah, great. And Trina, I'll go over to you.
Hi, my name is Trina Jones. I'm the CEO of Homelessness New South Wales, and we exist to build the capability of people and the capacity of systems to end homelessness. And we believe in a future where everyone has a safe home and the support to keep it. So I'm very interested to talk about what are the types of scenarios that can happen for people experiencing homelessness and how they can be better connected to their communities through sport and leisure.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And John?
Thanks, David. Yeah, John Ingler, so CEO of Shelter New South Wales. Look, we exist across the whole housing system, basically to make sure we advocate for people for whom housing insecurity is an issue. Most of the time that's to do with affordability, lack of affordable dwellings, but often it's to do with insecure properties as well. So sometimes a property might be affordable, but it's not very secure. Somebody's threatened with being thrown out because of a short lease, or it may not be accessible. So the whole lot of what we call all of the A's. Affordability is the main issue, but anywhere for which someone is having housing insecurity, Shelter New South Wales likes to get involved. Further to that, good communities are made up of people who've got not just secure housing, but housing in all of its manifestations, which includes healthy homes. And a part of that is being involved formally in sport, informally in leisure, or just being sure that we make sure that we promote physical activity for people. It's critical when it comes to your whole health.
Yeah, that whole person health. Excellent. So thanks for that background. So essentially today, what we're going to be talking about is how sport, leisure and physical activity sector can support homelessness issues and people from social housing. So that gives a little bit of the framework. But tell me, and I'll go to you, Trina, what's the destination for your sector?
So look, like I said, we have a vision for a future where everyone has a safe home and the support to keep it. And we know that in order to have the support to keep it, you've got to be well connected to your community. And part of that connection is about the people. And one of the ways that you can get to know the people is through sport. And so I'm really interested to have this conversation today.
Yeah, great. And for you, Jackson?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on John's point too about a healthy housing system. So the destination for Q Shelter is one where every Queenslander has a home, which comes in many different forms. But I stress the word home as opposed to a house. You know, home is a lot more than just the bricks and mortar, which we'll discuss today. And Trina's just touched on some of those points. I think the other part for us is where your birth status in Australia doesn't define your future. And we know that so many people are born into poverty and other circumstances. And one of the ways we can pull people through that is through other engagement and community building and sport and recreation activity that can really play a role. So it's probably the destination for us. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, great. And just to round off this question, John, for you.
I think destination would be, as I alluded to before, affordability is only one of the A's you need to consider. We need good amenity, appropriate location, adaptable, accessible, people to have agency. And what we're finding more and more is that we've got a changing urban form where people are renting longer in apartments, even with children and pets. So when I think about formal sport, informal leisure, or even just physical activity, you can't separate the fact that if you've got a backyard, or you're close to a park, or you've got a well-located property, irrespective of how affordable it is, there tends to be a correlation with how many options you have. So what we want to see is making sure that everyone has the best opportunity. Yeah, formally participate in sport by all means, soccer on a Saturday, go for organised leisure, great if you're close to walking groups or whatever. And then finally, even if you live in a building, an apartment building, and COVID taught us this, you still have to be able to have access to a way in which physical activity is part of your healthy housing.
Yeah, we definitely found that in COVID, didn't we? The importance of getting outside and in the environment and being active. So I'm really curious because this next question really is one that I've thought about a lot. And within how can sport and leisure and physical activity support homelessness issues and people in social housing? And I'll go over to Trina.
Look, I was thinking about this before we joined today, and it brought me back to a project that I was aware of in the UK. It was called the Single Homelessness Project Sport Project. It was basically set up to provide physical activity opportunities to people experiencing or at risk of homelessness across the UK to support their mental and physical activity. And so they found that people experiencing homelessness were on average spending about 18 hours a day alone or very sedentary in their rooms or isolated and away from their community. And they had a number of unmet mental and physical needs. And so this program set about to really try to break down the barriers between physical activity and engagement with people experiencing homelessness, but also to support them on a pathway to break the cycle of homelessness. So it was quite an innovative engagement tool. And what they did was they ended up with this range of physical activity opportunities like cycling, boxing, football, yoga, even chair aerobics. And they did it across about 12 local government areas, reaching over 800 people. And they had sessions in the parks, they had sessions in the hostels. And the whole idea was get out, meet someone, get to connect, but also get your health going as well. And they had engaged with a number of people in social housing in those areas and did trips to ice skating and rock climbing and just beautiful walks outside of the areas of London where some people would never even have left the city. So it was all about engaging with people to not just do the sport, but also connect. And what was really interesting to me from that program was 90% or 89% of participants improved their mental health and 92% of participants improved their physical health, with almost 80 participants saying that they reduced their stress, anxiety, and depression levels, and 81% going on to continue to keep that level of activity. And so that's quite a specific example, but what it does show is that this is a group of people who are often isolated and left out of kind of mainstream activities. And if you can design a way to engage them, that this can help them have mutual and many benefits across lots of domains in their life, particularly around their health. And once you've got a home and good health, and that's a major setup for access to education, employment, and participating fully in your community. So I think this is just a really interesting way to think about it.
What an incredible example. I was just wondering, do you know any of those kind of initiatives in Australia?
Look, there are things available in Australia. Like they're not all sports, but there's certainly leisure activities like the street choir, the Sydney Street Choir. There was a Sydney soccer team that the Big Issue were involved in, I know. And there are some initiatives, but not at the scale that I've seen active in the UK. And I don't want to dominate the conversation. I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to talk too. So maybe there'll be another chance. But I would love to look at social prescribing as a model for how we can engage people experiencing homelessness. And that's where when you see your GP and they prescribe you with depression, anxiety, heart risk. Instead of just getting the prescription for the drugs, you get prescription for social activity and connection. And that's one way that we could really see our local governments in particular step into that space alongside New South Wales Health to provide people more than just the pills to respond to their health issues, but also a prescription to connect with their community in a way that maybe they feel they are not welcome to do.
Yeah, prescribing exercise. Jackson, you share your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think Trina's on the nub of it there, really, in terms of, and what's well known for those of us that have worked in the sports sector, so I did for a big portion of my life, is that the physical and mental health benefits are really well known in the sector. I don't think we've probably numerically sort of understood that the way that we should across the economy, because we know that by doing that, by providing that activity, we actually have a huge preventative health impact on people in later life's reliance on the primary health system. So I think that's the case, David. As you know, we used to always try and make in sport. For me, the next part is how we connect that to housing. And I think Trina went to that a little bit further as well. One of the things, I hate to use the UK as an example again, but this is an area where I think there are some really good examples. And that's where some of the big housing trusts in the UK and some of the housing associations over there, the not-for-profit housing associations, are starting to pick up and purchase the latent capacity across the recreation system. So they're purchasing the leisure centres, they're doing deals with the council to take on those assets and make them a central feature of their housing or precinct environment. And I think this is critical because one of the challenges in sport for those on the bottom two income quartiles is access, both in terms of transport to activities and also cost. And there's some great programs around across jurisdictions around vouchers and subsidies, which go some way there. But there's nothing better than having that as part of the design of your housing precinct. You actually have that as a central feature. And I think this is probably the next phase for us in Australia in terms of design for social and affordable housing in new precincts and new development areas, is how you make that a central feature, bring down the barriers to entry, and all those great benefits will flow that Trina was talking about.
Yeah, so really integrated into the early stages of the design, and then how that rolls out when housing's developed. Interesting. John, you'd like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, further to that, and really building on what both Trina and Jackson have said. So I'm literally here on the central coast of New South Wales at the moment, just meeting with one of the more innovative community housing providers, and they've just regaled me with a story. So of course you can have the formal arrangements with subleasing space or, you know, making sure physical activity is there, but also the informal arrangements. So they've just revealed to me they've got a great agreement with Central Coast Mariners, where a whole lot of kids who would otherwise might have difficulty accessing a program like that to be involved in formal sport, so in this case soccer, football lessons over the weekend or during the week training, they've got a program that specifically targets their residents and their residents of social housing to make sure that those kids don't miss out. Again, I like your three levels here, David, because the other one I think of is leisure. One of the things that we heard through COVID was the absolute 2-year gap we had of kids having swimming lessons. And I do know of one innovative CHP, so community housing provider in Sydney, came up with an arrangement through the school, through the head of operations for the community housing provider, and formal subsidised swimming lessons for a whole group of kids who clearly had missed out. And it was going to be something that was going to be really difficult to catch up on. So yes, it might be formal sport, but it might be leisure. And then finally, I'm just going to throw in one of my own experiences here. Jackson and Trina are parents. We all get this. My kids had sat on their devices all day yesterday in the townhouse, and I thought, I've got to get out. And because they've been fans of bloody Bondi Rescue, right, I was able to bribe them, saying, okay, let's go and see where Bondi Rescue was filmed. So I made them do the very famous Bronte to Bondi walk at about 6 o'clock last night. Once you've done that walk, you've been to the where the lifeguards are, right? You know, they're on TV. The kids thought they were in heaven, thought they were on a movie set. I then had to make them walk all the way home. They slept like babies. There's no doubting the physical benefits.
That's good innovation, John. I like it.
John, I like this strategy. Took my 4-year-old into that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we know the benefits, don't we, of exercise and sport, and you know, it doesn't just make you feel good. It's you know, socially, and it's all the health aspects. And it, you know, when I think of people, you know, homeless, you know, it's like it's a human right to be active and to have, you know, to have access to this stuff for me. And I know it comes down to the social determinants of health, but that's why I'm really curious around what we can do more, particularly in leisure facilities and councils, and that's why I was so chuffed to get you guys together to really start to have a think about what can we do, and I think there is a lot of social stigma around people that in relation to homelessness and social housing. I grew up in social housing, so I get it. But how does this relate to the sport and leisure and physical activity sector for you guys? And I know the term NIMBY, not in my backyard, springs to mind. I just kind of wanted to, get your thoughts on that. And I might start with you, John.
Yeah, as you're talking, David, it's really funny. So I previously was involved, and this is a live issue, where community housing organisations, when they were seeking to acquire, for example, turnkey developments, we were steering away from buildings that had gyms and pools. And it was always, and I've got a property and an asset management background, and it's funny, I'm feeling bad now, because just as you're talking there, I thought, isn't that terrible? The very thing that probably would have made more of a difference to more people in a urban context of a 8-story building where absolutely leisure and sport is a really expensive commodity to otherwise purchase externally, having it in the building, designing it in. And no councils, by the way, have ever compelled anyone on a DA. No one's ever been told you have to put in a gym, you have to put in a pool, right? These are things that clearly the market wants and people desire, but yet we almost rob people at a design stage, particularly people who need it the most, of the very thing that would make a difference. So as we're talking, I'm feeling a little bit guilty that probably what the answer is to put more of it in, not less, and certainly never to use it as a reason why a particular group couldn't benefit. Here's a group, when we talk about the cohort of people in social and increasingly affordable housing, so key workers who are living upstairs, young kids exercising in the building. Why on earth would we ever not have a really good commitment, as we would in any other healthy building, a commitment to in-house facilities? I think that's probably the biggest take home, design it in.
Yeah, no, thanks for showing your vulnerability and that's a really great reflection, John. Jackson?
Yeah, you started with NIMBYism, Dave, and I think that still is a challenge across our sector. And but what I do think is on the move. So if you look at the last 2 years coming out of COVID, everyone was inside, everyone was isolated. I think the housing market everywhere in Australia now is so constrained, record high rental prices, record low availability. We've got an increasing number of people that are technically homeless or absolutely homeless with nowhere to call home. So I actually think public sentiment's sort of shifting just a touch. That's the hunch I've got. I'm not sure what everyone else thinks, but I think we need some research to back that up. One of the things we find, which John touched on, is the development application process, or the process where housing's approved at the moment. It's traditionally through local government authorities, but sometimes it can be accelerated via some programs through the state. Everyone's fearful of pushing the envelope in this space because they're worried about what public perception will be on the project. My provocation would be that we should have a conversation with the community now about what growth looks like and what mixed tenure looks like, even outside of any future developments. Let's talk about it now. Understand whether people even know what mixed tenure means, what different types of density means, what infill means versus high density. What is there just a general understanding of these concepts? And I would hazard a guess that there might not be. So I think part of this comes down to a lack of knowledge and understanding broadly across the community. And I'd stretch that into homelessness, but I'll let Trina speak to that a little bit more. But my experience in that space, having worked with a number of the service providers, is that it's not really well understood. And there are still some stereotypes that exist, and there's still lots of work to do to overcome that. But I do think it's about having a really broad conversation with the community.
Look, it's interesting to build on that. I think on your point, David, about growing up in social housing, so did I. And I think when I think about growing up, I wasn't personally into sport, but soccer particularly was a lifeline for a lot of young people around where I grew up. And the soccer was put on, it's put on by the youth clubs, and it was put on by the community development workers in the area. And that was an actual deterrent for antisocial behaviour and a way to engage particularly young boys at that time, although plenty of girls played it too, but particularly young boys in positive kind of youth activities, pro-social activities. And everything from tennis to kind of soccer was rolled out in the estate. I can imagine now the planning that went on behind that, but we weren't aware of that at the time. it's like, oh, the people are here with the soccer balls. And you were able to just go out and kind of engage with that. And I think that it's so important because parents don't have the money. If there are families in social housing or community housing providers, they don't have the money to send kids to summer school camps or the camps that cost a lot of money. So being able to have government investment in sporting programs in low income areas is critical. And I think particularly on the subject of engaging vulnerable groups, getting girls involved in sport and girls who are at risk of, disadvantage involved in sports is a great way for them to build their networks and get further engaged in their community and build their confidence as well. And I really see that as an action of government. So an action of government to fund community programs, to fund youth programs, to help people to have access to the broader health outcomes they can have, but also take the pressure off families. Because you can take the pressure off families, that can help them to sustain their tenancies in social housing as well. And while you were talking, David, I was thinking about the leisure side of things and people experiencing homelessness. And one of the areas that might be interesting to talk about as a group is how leisure facilities can be opened up in an emergency. And so we saw in the really hot weather, and actually David and I worked on this many years ago, full disclosure, we made our pools available for people experiencing homelessness in Sydney when there was a lot of heat waves as part of an emergency response. And that was about giving people a space to cool down, and opened up the community centres where there was air conditioning to cool people down in an emergency.
Yep.
So we started to think, how are we using our public assets for public good, not just for homes, but also for amenity? And John and Jackson will talk to this, in terms of good planning or good growth. But what that comes down to on the day is, how do we keep our people safe, connected, and support them to have equal opportunities?
Yeah, wonderful. And thanks for sharing that lived experience as well that you've had, because that's that, you can see where the passion comes from, Trina. But just to extend your comments there, which links us into the last question really, and it's like, what could councils and leisure providers and peak bodies do tomorrow to support homelessness issues and people within social housing from a sports, leisure, physical activity perspective? And one of those examples you raised was when we've had major events or heat waves. But yeah, what got any thoughts about what councils and these other organisations could do? And I'll go to Jackson.
Yeah, sure. Look, a couple to throw in there. This is, I guess, where the rubber hits the road in terms of the innovation and new ideas, because it kind of hasn't. We haven't really moved the dial on this yet, which is probably why we're having this conversation. I think partly when John touched on design, and I sort of started that off earlier, I've been thinking more about it. Like, it's almost, John, it's almost in line with the conversations we have around inclusionary planning in a way. So already developers, just mainstream developers, have to do certain contributions to the community every time they put a certain number of lots in, as you all probably know. It's about probably being a little bit more better planned as a system on that. It's like, well, instead of having 2 tennis courts or 1 basketball court or half a netball court, what do we really need to do to create a really vibrant sport precinct and facility around, say, 1,200 dwellings that might be for people of sort of low to moderate incomes and those families, so you can actually have all the benefits of organised sport? Because the reality is, a lot of the stuff that goes in new developments is usually just more for passive recreation, and there's not a lot of organisation around it. We know one of the great things about sport, David, is where the whole community gets involved. All the mum and dads are involved at the canteen. They're involved in volunteering as coaches or officials. And I think that's one of the things that one of the sports, a real leveler like that. It brings, different sort of socio-economic standards together. It's just, everyone comes together for the same purpose. And there's a bit of argy-bargy sometimes when the competitive juices flow, but usually that's done in really good spirit. Great friendships are made, and there's a lot of support that flows out. My experience has been a lot of support flows out of those communities and relationships. So I think it's something about some sort of inclusionary planning that kind of dictates the type of sport and recreation assets that should be in new developments. And then the other one I'd have to put in a plug for is that we've got to level the price out for those on low to moderate incomes. And for me, some of this sport and recreation at a base level really needs to be free of charge, and that's an area that governments can fund, whether it be local, state or federal. I think every kid should have an opportunity to participate in sport close to home, and get the sort of things out of it that I know I did, and I hope my daughter does. So I might just leave those two there.
Brilliant. And I'm going to just jump to John quickly because I know you have to run off, John.
Yeah, this is great. This is a perfect section. Question 4, David, a perfect segue, and really lovely. I like the fact that Trina and Jackson have both layered this. You know, I live in a part of Sydney that must have 5 or 6 really good pools, municipal pools, and they've all struggled, the inner west part of Sydney and Canterbury, where I've lived in, to pay for the renovations of those pools and get them up to the standard they need to be. And I sat there again. I feel like I'm being honest with you guys. I can tell you that you know, we don't always think that we know everything. You learn things and you have these aha moments. I'm sitting there recently looking up at the pool thinking they only really need the first 4 meters of that pool. Above that pool, this council is desperate to build affordable housing, social housing. Why is there not a 5-story tower on top of the pool, right? On top of the pool that has social and affordable housing in it, creates this fantastic thing. So every time now I see a pool, a bit like car parks, right? I go, what's the airspace that we're not using? Would cost the council nothing. A community housing organisation could run it. Trina's clients could make sure that they had use of it. You talked before about showers and amenities and facilities. It would be a win-win. And I'm sort of thinking, I don't know why, really, to blow Jackson's thing out the air, we really need innovation of almost a scale and a size that we've never seen. There's no reason why councils in Sydney couldn't provide all of the affordable housing that they need for key workers and some social housing on top of existing pools. We're moving more and more to pools that are undercover, half not. It's a great, to be honest, no-brainer. We really need to shift the dial to have local councils seeing the difference that they can make for residents. And I think pool, you know, affordable housing, social housing on top of existing pools is the first thing we could do. Way at the other end of the room, vouchers as well on the way before we get there. But I think that sort of blue sky thinking is what we really need.
Radical thinking from
love that, John. Love that.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Capitalise on the airspace. Yeah.
I might have to let you go on that one, David. I'm so sorry, Jackson,
That's okay.
Trina, and David.
No, we
But
understand,
really
John.
Good to be
Thank-
involved.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're amongst the brightest here, David. You picked well. See you guys.
Good on you, John.
Yeah.
Let
Radical
the record
thinking there.
reflect. Let the record reflect. He had a train that was going to park at the
Yes,
station,
and I
and he
started
didn't get
with
there on
late,
time.
so thanks, John. Yeah.
That's right. Trina, I'd love you to just carry that on. What your thoughts there?
Yeah, look, I think when we invest in stronger communities, we get stronger communities. And so ensuring that we have, first of all, in all of our towns and cities, we have housing for all. So it's not about where you live that determines what access you have to things. And that would mean that there's affordable and, you know, social housing available for all different income levels in every community. And then alongside that you've got the means to access the best of those community amenities, and so that we've got kind of equality around access to support services and to leisure services. So I would say whether that's heavily discounted access or free access for low income people and families, but also kind of curriculum based sport at the community centre. So the ability to join into the yoga class, the chair aerobics, the walking group, and the after school sport that can really help to people to make connections, and those connections are vital for people to live thriving and happy lives.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. It's it is a really complex topic we're talking about, and I just feel that there is a lot of opportunity to support those most in need, really. Within the sports, leisure, and physical activity sector. Is there anything else that kind of springs to mind for both of you from what we've kind of talked about in terms of how we could support people from homelessness or people in social housing?
Look, it's not something that we've touched on yet, but one thing that I did want to raise around what I have seen successful is sport programs that start to engage people who are currently in custody and who are exiting prison.
Yep.
And one of the things I'd like to flag is that 54% of people who are exiting custody in New South Wales are expected to be homeless every year. And so starting to build connections with people while they're in prison is a major step towards supporting them to come out and to rehabilitate and be supported within their communities. And I've seen some really good programs in Redfern with Tribal Warrior who have engaged with First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are currently in prison. It's a program that's delivered by the Redfern Police and Tribal Warrior. It's been going for years. It's really popular. It works really well. people develop mentorship, they get engaged with the community, and then when they come out, they are coming out to a supportive environment, and they often can get links to other support services like housing, accommodation, and employment support. So starting to think innovatively about how sport and leisure can be the hook to engage vulnerable and marginalised groups and support them to better link in with specialist homelessness services, but also mainstream services, to be a responder and a first responder to people who could be at risk of experiencing homelessness. So I would say that would be something that maybe we haven't talked about that might be worth looking at as well, David.
Yeah, great. And you've kind of touched on my second episode there, where I will be talking to people, you know, who've come out of prison, and how we can support them with employment, but also, you know, within the industry.
Dave,
Jackson?
I just want to add to that. I think it's a terrific suggestion. I think part of that goes to, you know, we already know people that exit in justice systems and even some of the emergency health systems at the moment, even though they're meant to come out into some sort of housing plan, they often don't. They often tip out into the streets and back into the environment, the only environment that they've known for their whole life, which can be, you know, unsavoury in many ways and not conducive for getting them back on track. And one of the things I know when I worked in sport, David, particularly when I worked with the AFL, is that we did a lot of work with disadvantaged youth. And I guess you could call that preventative work, because if those pathways went down the path they might otherwise, they would have absolutely been homeless and live in, you know, in great housing insecurity. So I think what Trent is talking about there is there's an argument to be made about this sort of work being upstream as opposed to at the crisis end as well. You know, housing can be impacted, or homelessness can be impacted by it never occurring in the first place. And I think we need to push our policy sort of site much further upstream than we currently have it. We still got to work at the crisis centres. I'm sure Trina would agree. Even harder than we currently do. But I just would love to see our public policy focus go into more areas of government, you know, education, you know, a whole range of different areas that we can reach into and touch and ensure that people don't actually end up in these situations. So I think that's a really good call out.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Jackson just said, and really see it as a preventative tool as well. Yeah.
Yeah, great observations there. And yeah, there's obviously a lot of work to do, but you know, I think having people like you guys in your sectors, and you know, I think you're just doing terrific work, and it is such an important role that you're playing to support people, you know, with housing. And I just want to say a big thank you for giving me your time today, because I know you're so incredibly busy. And you know, I think from somebody who's within, you know, the sport leisure sector, we have to lift our gaze a little bit to, you know, just not just looking at what's in front of us. We're part of a bigger system, and you know, making sure that people housed properly and people have access to services, I think is really important. So yeah, you've definitely got me thinking, and hopefully there's opportunities there where we can support more people.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, David, for making the links, because we're stronger when we work together. So we're absolutely behind any innovations and ways to make better outcomes for people at risk or experiencing homelessness.
Couldn't agree more, David, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going across sectors. I think it's a great start. So well done for pulling it together, and nice to spend some time with you too, Trina.
Yeah.
And Trina, can you still not see us?
I actually can see Jackson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She's got me, just not you,
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you again, and I hope to catch up with you both in person soon. And yeah, all the best for the rest of the year, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks very much. Okay, take care. Thanks, folks.
See ya.
Thanks, Trina.
Bye.
Thanks,
See ya.
Dave.
Bye.
See you
ya.
later, guys.
Bye.